It's always really helpful to bring when we're looking at projects or contracts. So thank you for joining us. Appreciate it.
Happy to be here.
And Helene, hi. Okay, we're gonna move to item 2, which is updates on past projects included but not limited to the Pulaski Park wall study. Amy, you said that you had invited Victoria.
Yeah, she said she was coming. I don't see her yet. But this, just to remind everyone, this project was for $40,000. It was from 2021, and 22,175 of that has been expended. So 17,825 remains in their grant. And there was a very short, like maybe 3 to 4 page memo that Victoria Houle, let me back up a minute. So, we haven't had a city engineer for some time. So various people came and left, unfortunately. So the person managing the grant was not there. So what the city has done is they have an interim city consulting engineer who's, works remotely, basically, it seems. And, so she's got to catch up with millions of different projects. And I have been in touch with her. And I've looked at this report, and I was surprised by how short it was, and it wasn't really clear. Like, I didn't think the recommendations, like compared to other reports we've gotten, they've really said this is like, very elaborate things, like here are different options. This is what you'd have to do. From what I got from her, is there's stormwater damage, but it's they were recommending more things like a video camera inspection, but they can't really get somebody to do that because it's such a small job. So the only way they could, so that's the tricky thing right now, because, and Victoria was saying, well, if there were other jobs that they had to do, it could be tacked on to that, that they're doing for the city. So, and we looked back at the old quote which was, the contract with the city, which is quite extensive. So it does seem like it's more should be coming from them, because they were supposed to have this report in May. So that's what I got from her. I was hoping, she did say she was going to come. I can try sending her a message to see if she'll join and say more.
Or we can always reopen the item later too, if she is able to join later. I don't know if folks got a chance to look over the contract that was sent by Amy to the committee, but welcome, Maribel. One of the, just wanted to say hello and welcome.
Hello.
And clearly we're still trying to respond to when we did the Pulaski Park wall study, the concept was they would look at the wall itself, but then also because they found the cracking going all the way down the concrete walk alongside the wall, there was concern that meant that there was actually structural instability that was compromising not just the concrete itself degrading on the wall, but potentially even underneath the wall through erosion or other issues. And the contract very much does tell them to focus on that and to uncover what's going on. Is it a storm drain issue? What is it? So hopefully that means that they're doing this work and that we're finding out through a final study. Finally, it's been such a slow process of pushing for this to be done and resolved and for us to get information on it, because we of course can't move forward with an application that would ask us to restore the wall until we even know if the wall is stable, because there's no point in fixing the wall and then it erodes into the river or down the embankment, right down into the railroad track that's there. Okay. Any questions about this project? And then we can just table as we're waiting to see if Victoria Houle is joining us.
Madam Chairman, to your knowledge, and to Amy, to your knowledge, is it incumbent upon getting the approval of the railroad for them to proceed any further? Is there a judicial or a contractual?
I really don't know, but it's interesting you bring up the railroad, because I know the report said that there's a problem with I guess some of the investigation because of the railroad that's in the way. I wish I had that report right in front of me.
It does say specifically that. You're right.
But
so I didn't know if you or Megan knew by definition, is there a legal or a contractual authority that the railroad has that says, no, get off our property, you can't do it, and buzz off?
Yeah. We've had a number of issues with this property and other properties that are along the railroad, and we have a lot of properties that are parkland that are along the railroad. And because I think at one point there were 6 companies, I think now it might even be as many as 9 who are using the railroad, many of whom are freight. We need to coordinate with all of those in order to do any work. And that has been an ongoing issue for why the vegetation hasn't been able to be fixed. And that's why Pulaski Park, which should be a view park, was designed by Olmsted to be a view park. It's not a view park in many areas. You can't sit on a bench and see the water. That was the entire point of that park. So that is something that we have been attempting to write. And in our conversations with Tom Reynolds, it has been a non-starter. They just don't seem to be moving forward with addressing it. I will say in the contract, Mike, and I'll read this section to you. It says, in an effort to better understand the condition of the existing storm drain pipe that runs along the sidewalk adjacent to the retaining wall, Fuss and O'Neill will engage a sub-consultant to conduct a camera and TV inspection of the line. Based on our observations from the initial elevation of the retaining wall and surrounding areas, it is possible that that storm drain has cracks, clogs, or other deficiencies that are impacting the surrounding subgrade and retaining wall. We anticipate that the sub-consultant will require 1 day for mobilization, scoping the storm drain, and demobilization. Upon completion, F&O, Fuss and O'Neill, will work with the sub-consultant to develop a summary report that details our findings and recommendations for maintenance, repairs, or replacement. And then underneath that, it says assumptions and exclusions. The first bullet point, it says, it is assumed that F&O and our sub-consultants will be provided access to the retaining walls and surrounding area of the Pulaski Park during typical business hours. It's assumed that the city of Holyoke will remove vegetation and debris as necessary for F&O and our sub-consultants to complete their work. And that the final design of any repairs or other recommendations as a result of the evaluations is not included in the scope of work. So that to me is interesting because their fee, the field investigation, is $12,500, and the structural evaluation report is $9,700. And it sounds like what they're saying is they'll give suggestions, but that it's not going to be scoped out to a full design like we did with Lady Liberty, right? That report was an exhaustive, here's how you will do all of the work, right? So this is the contract that we have currently, and they need to have access to it, and the debris needs to be removed in order for them to do the work. So that is no small thing, actually, to coordinate with the railroad companies and then to make it work. And it's really hard when you don't have an engineer.
To the side, and this may not be matter at all. I'm wondering if Richie Neal, as a congressman who deals with federal authorities and federal contracts with federal companies that, like the railroad and so on and so forth, that might his office offer suggestions or a name or a phone number to call the railroad and ask for somebody locally that we could speak with, or the city could speak with, to get this resolved. Because I got a feeling the railroad is going to come and go, and so will we, and nothing will be done because they're the railroad, and that's the way it is. Unless you get somebody like Richie Neal, who's a powerful congressman, to pick up the phone and get some answers. That's just a suggestion. So,
yeah.
A thought.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think there is, of course, it's figuring out how to work with Victoria Houle or whoever becomes our full-time city engineer. We've run into real issues around the fact that it's a union negotiation issue. The pay by the union contract that we can afford a city engineer can't attract or keep a city engineer. So this council has attempted to say, we would love to raise the rate significantly in order to attract a client, someone who will be interested in the position. But we can't because it's beyond the scope of what the union contract says we can offer. So we'll see what happens. It's been posted. And I think the mayor is attempting to work with the union and figure out a way forward. Because effectively right now we can't hire someone. And so we've been stuck. Actually, as a taxpayer, it's infuriating. We're paying more for consultants than we would be for the city engineer and for less effective work. because they're not someone tasked with holding on to all of the projects and moving them all forward. They're sort of being tasked a portfolio of like specific things to work on. But they're also not maybe developing the relationships that we would need for example, with the railroad in order to get things done, right? So yeah, political answer might be necessary on a number of fronts. But at least that gives you a sense of where it is right now. And we have so many projects, right? Amy, how many projects do we have in total right now? Roughly, if you're not sure. Yeah, I think you're muted.
Sorry, I thought I was gonna get a call, so, or make a call to the engineer. I'd say at least 20, about 20, especially including the new ones. So yeah, there's a lot of projects. It's
Yeah.
really a lot, yeah.
We have a lot of projects and a lot of projects that have made some progress and then hit a point and stopped, right? Or maybe they should be done, but they're not done because there's something that is still lingering. And this is one of those projects that we have our eye on. Okay. I mean, at least we have this contract now with us and O'Neill, so things are moving forward in a way that honestly for the last 2 years, nothing has happened. So this is a good thing. But still, we need to think the pressure on and keep asking questions to make sure it's continuing to move forward. Okay. Amy, do you have any other past projects updates that you want to give?
Past project updates? Not really. I mean, if I didn't really know that we were gonna go through that, but so I'm sorry, I didn't get a chance to look them over to have something ready off the tip of my tongue, so. Yeah.
All right. So let's move to number 3. Update on status of contract completion and execution. Amy, do you want to just walk us through where you're at with creating the contracts and if there's anything holding up certain contracts, what you're waiting for?
Sure. So, yeah, so there's 4 of the contracts I've drafted. There's the Jones Point Park contract. So I'm waiting, for the subcommittee to approve that. And that's some members of this committee. And the other one that has been drafted is Wistariahurst retaining wall. And there's kind of a holdup with the award recipient, which I guess Meg maybe will go into later with that one. And then there's Veterans Graves Preservation, which has been drafted, but during this meeting, I think you need to determine whether a CPA sign will be required. So that's one of the terms that has to be decided on. And then there's the Korean War plaque restoration, which has been drafted, and I'm waiting for the subcommittee to approve it. And I guess, again, it's the same question about the CPA sign. So yeah, those 4 are pretty much ready to go. The other 4 I've yet to do.
Okay. So the last 4 are just the Holyoke City Hall, Granite Stair, and Annex Stairs restoration study, the Holyoke Murray Grand Stirrups, the Appleton Mill redevelopment, and Library Commons 2. Those are the 4.
Yeah, all the others that are listed on the agenda. Mm-hmm.
All right. Let's move to number 4, just to kind of go over deeper into contract terms, because I think as we get to those, it'll resolve some of the issues with the 4 that Amy's already worked on so far. So, Amy, this was your request that we go back and talk again about in the contracts, if we are going to ask to withhold the last 10% and like what your thinking is, if that's something that you still want to do, or if you wanted to do it in a different way. So what's your thoughts on that right now?
Yeah, I realized I'm thinking about it further that most of these are city projects, and when it's a city project, what happens is the person for the city who's managing it sends me an invoice and a request, or they give me the information that they need of the vendor paid directly. So in other words, the vendor has done the work and they need that vendor paid. So I don't see how withholding 10% will work in that case, because then you're withholding the money from the vendor. And also it would be hard to know how to divide up the full award into 10%. When they may have multiple vendors. So yeah, so I don't think that term after all works. So I don't think that we should do it. It might be possible if for a non-city reimbursement project, it would be more possible because they were usually through reimbursement where, you know, the grant recipient, they pay the vendors directly. So, and then I reimburse them. So, but in general, I would rather not do the 10% because I just think it's too tricky mathematically to figure it out. And also because of the vendor situation with the city projects.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Any other thoughts on that? I know that's something as a committee we had gone back and forth on that. Helene?
Yeah, I guess I'm feeling like we could still do the piece that I had suggested, which is that if there's like if there's a project that has had outstanding, you know, where the final report hasn't come in, that things aren't finished, then we won't consider it in our docket. Basically, that if an organization or department doesn't finish up with Amy and doesn't give sort of like, okay, here's the situation and et cetera, then it doesn't, if they apply again, it doesn't go into our consideration. So, and that would be in the contract, just to be clear, like, you know, this is due, and if you don't provide, you know, the final report and everything in this contract, you know, we're not going to consider any additional projects from that.
What if we named it positively? Like the flip side of that is previous applicants in good standing are encouraged to apply.
Sure, but I mean, I just think like for what Amy wants, which is to be clear, kind of the culture is that, you know, everything has to be completed before you can move on and seek out new money. I think there would be, it would be helpful to have it clear that we won't consider that until those things are completed. I think there could be exceptions, like if it's not due yet and, you know, something's, you know, like, but if it's due and it's not in, then there's not the money, like we're just not going to consider until those pieces are all completed. And if people, you know, if a group misses a cycle, my hope would be that that wouldn't happen again.
Mm-hmm. So like previous grantees wishing to be considered for future funding cycles must be in good standing in order to apply.
Sorry, or just have completed all the contract terms, including the final report.
Okay. Mary and then Amy.
I'm totally in agreement with what Helene said. We have to do something, and it should be in the contract. And then will we keep track of that? How will we keep track of that? And the other question is, when they file their application, they should put on the application how much they're going to be spending on that, on the signage or whatever. Do we do that now?
So we've gone back and forth on that, and I know the committee last cycle asked Amy to make clear to all applicants that it need to be in the budget, and to review that it was in the budget. And I think some are and some potentially aren't, or they're just not understanding how expensive these signs can be, and so they think of it as like, oh yeah, sure, at the end, of course we can do that, and they're not realizing that like a really permanent, nice exterior sign can be $400. And so they're not building that into the budget. So we've talked about some possible options around getting quotes that we think are reasonable from companies that seem to have some, you know, length of time, right? They're like trusted, you know, reliable companies that you would expect to continue being in existence, where like we effectively are providing quotes to them around like, here's what X, you know, sign costs. Here's what this sign costs. Here's what this sign costs. If you want to work with this company, it's a company we encourage you to work with because they've done signs for us, and here is what they cost. Build one of the costs of these signs into your budget. So that there's a really clear standardization of the ask, because some applicants get it and some don't, right? They just have no concept that a sign can be that expensive. They get to the end of the project and they're kind of floored, and it's to them, it's an unexpected cost. This is particularly an issue for small projects. And so that's something that is here too around signage, for us to look at, because the issue is, do we want to require a sign for every project? And maybe we don't. Maybe we want to say, if your project costs under X amount of money, we don't require a sign. Maybe we have to talk about housing projects again, because we've talked about that in a couple of different scenarios, because housing projects can be very different from each other. But so far we have not required housing projects to put CPA signs up for different reasons. We also have some historic projects that we have to talk about. Like, do we want to have it, for cemetery, for restoration? Do we want to require them to have some sort of signage on a exterior fence? I think early on it was sort of this blanket, like, of course there should be a sign. And now that we're getting into different kinds of projects where different projects have different, nuances, it's sort of clear that we as a committee have to get more to a place of consensus around why we're requiring signs and in what situation we want to require signs. And to what extent do we want to help them? Do we want to make a standard sign and say, here it is, put it up? Do we want to give them quotes? Here's what standard signs cost. Choose one of these. Or if you want to choose your own, you have to run it by us ahead of time.
So what do we need to move this forward? I mean, so I'm hearing like multiple things.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, I will say that we're talking about, withholding the last 10%. I want to return back to that and then come back to signage, because actually, it came up now, but it's actually 4E. And it's one of those things, like, if we require it, yes, right, they should have to complete all the things, including the final report and the sign, in order to have their project deemed in good standing and have finished all the contract terms. The question, I think, is, if the city projects, we don't want to require this, but do we want to require it for non-city projects? Amy?
Yeah, I just wanted to put in that I agree with Helene, but what I think it has to be a little clearer or ironed out. So, for example, Helene, is your suggestion that that it be put in the contract, basically, that you need to meet all the terms of this contract before you can submit a new application for another project? And if that's the case, does that mean, because we do have a lot of projects that they eventually are completed, but they're done beyond the deadline. So what I'm wondering is, are you saying that those people, can still apply? Or are you saying that, well, you actually, you finished the project finally, but you took more time than the deadline, so that's kind of a count against you? I mean, I just need something clear, and even some language would help, to understand what exactly it should say. Because, I mean, there are different things. There's sometimes a situation like where a project, they did everything and they did it on time, but they never put a sign up, for example, like the JFK monument, whatever. That's one example.
No, they did.
They put a permanent sign up eventually?
Beautiful.
Okay, I didn't.
Granite monument.
Know that. I thought they never did. Okay.
You're thinking of Smith Berry.
So yeah, I guess I'm just wondering, because, if it's very competitive, a committee could say, well, we want someone who will actually do things on time. Or you could be more forgiving and say, well, okay, you can apply again, but only after you finally fulfilled the terms of the contract. But in a way, if they didn't do it by the deadline, they really didn't fulfill the terms of the contract. You know what I'm saying? So that's the tricky area.
I mean, I think that many groups come to us and say, we need more time, or this changed, we need money. And I feel like we're very understanding of that. I think for me, there's a sense of, I don't know, a month after the deadline and we hear nothing, or, I don't know, 2 months, whatever to make sense to you, Amy. But I feel like what I've kind of heard is that sometimes it's done, there's these last things, the money's been paid, and now it's their obligation to finish their piece of it, and you get ghosted and you're spending your time chasing people down and things like that. And so I don't want to punish groups if there's hiccups, and then we know about it and we can extend or even if they send a sort of a letter to you that's like, sorry, this hasn't been completed, and people can say how we could do that in a uniform way. But essentially, if everything has been completed, if the money has all been paid out, if the money has been all paid out, to me, within a month, everything else should be finished, is my sense. That it would be very unusual for the money to be all paid out and there to be a need for 6 months later to provide a report. So I just wonder if we could say, once that is all paid out, there's this amount of time to provide the final report. And if you don't, and you don't submit a update, or you need to get that extended, then that's considered being delinquent. And until that's done, we would not consider the application.
Does that language look right, Helene?
Yes, I think just in terms of the timing, I would want to know maybe from Amy just what makes sense.
I think we decide that as a committee. If we've approved that someone can continue, that's on us.
Okay.
Right.
I guess I'm asking Amy just
they have to come get permission from us
right.
for their project to be extended.
Yeah. So if that's already baked in,
I don't think that would be Amy.
I'm just asking really for Amy, what adds to the simplicity of her job. I don't want to create a situation where implementing this becomes harder. So that is, and there's, I'm sure, some things I'm not thinking about. So that's why I would be interested. I think what you have written, though, is very clear. And I think it seems really reasonable. And so, having that in the contract, if somebody doesn't do this, then we don't consider. I think I like that simplicity. But I know Mary has her hand up and Amy too, so I will stop talking.
Okay. Mary, did you want to speak?
Actually, it was a mistake that I had my hand up, but now that I have the opportunity, I'm going to take it. Okay, so in the minutes from the last time, it said, review and approve standard contract terms for 2025. And then we listed 4 specific terms to be added to the contract. I'll read them. Disbursement forms must be filled out and included with invoices. That's 1. 2, any minor changes to the scope of work, as long as they are in the spirit of the project and align with the goals of the project, may be approved by the CPA committee. 3, 10% of the funds awarded will be retained until all terms of the project are met. And 4, failure to complete the terms of the project will prevent future funding for the applicant organization in subsequent funding rounds. So that's what we passed.
So
are we now
named
saying
that,
pardon?
Yes. So we named that, but we didn't have language for that 4th bullet point in any of the contracts that the subcommittee looked at. So we were trying to figure out what is that language then? And also, even though we voted to approve the 10%, what we heard from Amy afterwards is that might logistically not be possible, and we may want to drop that requirement.
All right, so then do we need to do that this evening as well?
Yeah.
Change the motion, change the plan of action.
Yeah, that's why we're going back over it again. Because
whatever we come up with,
that. Amy?
Okay.
I think Mary makes a good point, though, that it was a different thing that was decided on last meeting, was just that they would not receive funding if they didn't follow the contract terms again. But now it seems like it's a more moderate position that's being put forward, that yes, you can apply for funds, but only after you've followed the terms. So I guess that's one thing, a question that needs to be addressed. And the other point I just wanted to make is that this doesn't really seem like a term that, I don't know if this would belong in a contract. It seems like it's more something for the application process that maybe should go at the top of the application. I mean, I don't, you know what I mean? Like if a lawyer were looking at this, it just doesn't seem like it's about a future contract. It's not, usually these contracts are specifically about the scope of work and the expectation for the scope of work.
And then
So
it
those are
could
my
be-
2 points, that it does seem like this is the more like not as extreme as the what was decided last meeting. And also, yeah, where should it go is the question.
I think if you, I mean, this is also us going back and forth with you, Amy, because you're in charge of this process to make sure that like we're thinking it through and you have the policies and structures that you need to feel like the job is possible. And that you have the support that you need to work with applicants. So I think it makes sense for it to go into the application, and then you could have a box underneath where like you have to check off that previous projects have met contract terms. I do think though that there's one unresolved issue that Helene brought up earlier, and I know you responded to it. But one of the issues is that we have a lot of concurrent projects from the same grantees. Especially city projects, right? But sometimes non-city as well, where we might have 4 different ongoing projects, one that started in FY18, one FY19, one FY20 that are still kind of concurrently occurring. So that if that's the case, then we would have projects that we just don't know yet, right? Because they haven't completed their project yet.
Yeah.
Well, within the 3-year scope that we've given them, right? And I think that's okay. I don't think that we can say to somebody like, just because you have a project with us going concurrently, that doesn't mean that's prohibiting you from coming back and asking us for money for a different project.
Oh, Victoria Hool is here.
Yeah, I saw that. Helene, and I'm so sorry. Helene and then Mike. Sorry, Mike.
Oh, okay. So just quickly, I guess, I am certainly not here to give a legal opinion, but I do, I mean, to me, it would make sense in a contract as well, just because there's sort of, it is somewhat limiting of like future ability to do things, and with to, like apply, like be eligible to apply for public funds. And so the person kind of, has to know that that's something that they potentially are giving up if they take this and don't complete the project to the terms. So, that's consideration, and I think that would be appropriate. I actually do kind of agree with the more moderate language of today, and so I think that's what I meant last week. And it's always good to talk and hear how things sound maybe a little bit after, just to be sure, just because again, with the concurrent projects, I don't want this to be like something that, forever, like that takes any groups out of the running forever, because there may be, we work with small groups with like run by volunteers and other things where they may be just sort of working to get their act together, or somebody leaves. There might be like a legitimate reason that things aren't getting done, quite as quickly. I just don't want them to take the time to consider their application until they've squared away their last project, if it's over when the deadline is they were supposed to get their report, without any kind of explanation. So that would be my perspective on that, is that, it also provides a carrot, which is, okay, get it done, get your thing done, and then you can apply. And so to hopefully get that for Amy, so she can get that stuff off her plate.
Mike?
Madam Chairman, just have it apply for city projects. They don't have to adhere to this. For all non-city projects, adhere to the 10%. That'll make it a lot easier for everybody. It's based upon trust. If you think the person's doing the job will do the job, then you don't need a 10% penalty if you don't do the job. As I brought this up several years ago, when we first started talking about this, when a contractor comes to your house and he doesn't complete all the work yet, wants to get paid in full, that's not a good way to do it, because when you discover that he didn't do the things that he said he would do, you're out of luck. You've already paid him all the money that he's due. the 10% was based on the fact that the contractor or whatever the service that was we're talking about would do it to 100%. If you didn't do it to 100%, somebody from the city, an inspector or whatever the case may be, would say, no, he didn't do the work, and we're going to hold 10% until you do the work. Then when it's finished and complete, and we got a letter of completion from the building department or these building inspector, then we'd release the money. But this would be for the city projects, we know it's the city. If they don't do it, well, it's on them. We're trusting that they will do their due diligence and do their work and do whatever to the best of their ability and complete the project as stated. It is the non-city people that I'm most apprehensive about. That's why I think we should keep the 10% as a way to ensure that non-city people do the work thoroughly, that's inspected by the building inspector or whatever department is in charge of that and says, yes, they've committed it and we've got a signed letter of approval and released all the funds to pay that particular person. That's reasonable. Do we have to hold the city accountable? Well, if we do, then we got bigger problems than 10%. So I think we're making this far more difficult than it has to be.
Okay, so I'm hearing that, Mike, you're saying let's just add non-city after term 3. And then it sounds like the language for 4 at this point is very similar, but we sort of landed on language that's a little bit softer and also I think a little bit more specific because it includes the permanent CPA sign if required and a final report. So do these updated contract terms look good to folks? Okay, I want to come back and look at the disbursement form and have Amy share that with us in a few minutes, but I want to go back to agenda item 2 that we started with because Victoria has now joined us. Welcome. So we did talk through the project a little bit, Victoria, and so just to recap, some of the questions that came up are, so we have this contract, has the work been scheduled? Are there any issues that have kind of cropped up with the railroad, because we've had an issue in the past with kind of the railroad and the complexity of that preventing work at that site. And then when would we expect a final report based on that contract and that work?
Okay, and this is the Pulaski Park wall, correct?
Yep.
Okay,
Yes.
I only say that because it's the first I'm hearing of the railroad, so railroad's not an issue. It was something entirely different. Okay. And I apologize greatly for missing the 6 o'clock time. So I don't know if Amy went through some of the sort of the first draft report. As you know, I'm sort of doing the engineering role part-time from home with the baby. And so wasn't totally familiar with all of the projects. It was kind of running in the background. So when it came up to this, I think it was a May 1st deadline or April 30th deadline-ish, I reached out to Fuss and O'Neill to see where the work was being, like where it stood. And Jason Ledoux had mentioned to me that there was an issue getting somebody out to do the video inspection of the drainage pipes. And that is common, especially if you have just a small section. It's sometimes hard for cities to get someone in to do a full day's worth because they're just really like booked up. And so originally I thought, well, maybe that could be postponed as sort of a future investigation. And so he finalized the report. Although when I go back and I look at the original agreement, looking at drainage was a sort of main component. So I think in very rushed fashion, we got a report that doesn't necessarily meet all of the criteria of what the original scope was. The original scope included like sort of recommendations for repairs to the wall in the future. And we got sort of a little bit more information on the investigations, if that makes any sense. So they did do some test pits at the site and got some of that data in terms of soil and things like that, and looked at where the footing, so they noted that there's no footing element on the backside of the wall, that it's likely unformed. It just looked like it was rough poured, meaning like somebody just sort of like poured concrete in the ground. They didn't form it with wood beams or, you know what I mean, like framed out or anything like that. And it wasn't precast either, so it wasn't like nice boxes. Obviously, I think we all visually see that the precast segments, meaning the pieces of the wall, are tilted. That there's some cracks in the sidewalk that almost, the way they almost align with the wall. And then extensive vegetation growth. And so their general conclusion is that, based on the geotech part, not any video inspection, is that just saturated soil and sort of heaviness is likely causing the wall to shift. Because it's not that there's no change of use that maybe would cause that issue. They also mentioned that freezing and thawing of water, and that's, you know, also a problem for sidewalks in general, could be an issue. And that sort of future investigations should be done. I think if they did the video inspection, which I had made a note, the city hasn't scheduled any, but sometimes we try to schedule video inspections of pipes before we're going in to do a paving project or something like that. I had noted, you know, that location, like maybe we could add it in the next time we have a round to get the information. I think regardless of what you get in that video inspection, the result is still probably the saturated soils and stuff behind the wall, if that makes any sense. The video inspection might identify a leak, in which case that's great, but I mean, that's not great, but I think even when you fix it, that's not going to maybe fix the problem. And then if you did the video inspection and there was no breaks, then you would still be at the sort of presumption of just saturated soil behind there. I have reached out to Fuss and O'Neill to address the report in general, to have it more closely align with what the original agreement sort of said, and to try to get actual recommendations, so that the end of this report, because it was my understanding when I was talking to Amy, it almost sounded like the purpose of this was to get recommendations, so sort of move to a next phase, right? So if we wanted to fix it, to be able to use this as a way to do cost estimates and future repairs to the wall. And right now it's still sort of not fully conclusive, just guesses as to, or makes presumptions, educated guesses as to what's causing the problem. So I'm still waiting to hear back from them. And although it was yesterday when I reached out, so that's the summary. I haven't heard anything. The railroad is not part of the issue. If there's any other specific questions, feel free. I know I just kind of rambled a little bit, but.
So I guess, I was concerned about the report because I feel like I could have written this report. I just by walking, like we already knew this, like we paid significant amounts of money for a study that would give us information, to your point, that would be actionable. We could then do something based on it. This report says, there's two places where it says error, reference source not found, where I feel like they just didn't even finalize their own report before they sent it. And then on top of that, they were like, well, in conjunction with the lack of footing on the retained side and the vegetative growth, that's the road issue, Victoria. The vegetative growth may also contribute to the instability issues seen through the wall leaning, tilting, and sidewalk heaving. However, it's our understanding that it isn't possible to complete this effort due to the proximity of the adjacent railway. We believe that further evaluation of this area may provide additional insight into the current condition of the wall. That's what we paid you to do, was to assess the wall. And they're like, well, if you really assess the wall, you might find out more. Well, yes, that's what we paid you to do. So it was sort of like just a bizarre report to get back. It just didn't feel respectful for the amount of time and money that has been spent into trying to get answers. Because the goal isn't to know there's a problem. We know there's a problem. We're trying to figure out how to resolve the problem. Like, this committee could move forward and say, great, let's fix the wall. And the whole thing could be crumbling down the railway embankment. Like, we can't take taxpayer funding and fix the wall, but and not resolve the two other issues. And one of them is the vegetative overgrowth, because it's supposed to be a view park. It names that in the first lines of the report, and it's not anymore. And it's because we seem to not be able to communicate and have any leverage with the railroad to actually do the work that we need to do and that they need to do in order to clear the vegetative overgrowth, nor do we seem to be able to easily communicate with them even to, finish the work that needs to get done to understand the problem.
Yeah.
So that's something I'm really concerned about. And I know that you are coming in as a consultant and it's hard because we don't have a full-time city engineer that's like moving this project forward. But this was this was FY 18, 19?
I
What
do
was
think I've heard it being old.
It was a while ago.
What I can say is, when you say the reference error piece, that was definitely in the email, like, because we sent initial comments back to Fuss and O'Neill very quickly, because I will say the time we got this report at 10:23 p.m. on April 29th. You know what I mean? Like after they had said, so it was very rushed. When I wrote back, there were all those things. When you say it wasn't thorough, like I had read the brevity of sort of the recommendations to the point where like I didn't actually even get all the way to the railroad because I was already like, this is not all enough, right? It's like I already saw the general stuff and it wasn't there. I 100% agree. I am trying to, we have only paid them, I think, a very small partial payment on their second in contract. So it looks like they had maybe an original contract that was 13,500. The second one that was this scope was something like 22 something. I think we've paid in the $7,000 range. So we haven't fully paid it at all. So we have that leverage. And I will continue to follow up with where that stands, because I do think that we need sort of more definitive information. I also think too, like there would have been copies of the test pit results or more information. When I talked about pictures, like, oh yeah, there's pictures. There just weren't really like a ton of pictures. There's probably more, but I think it's probably sort of a combination of that aspect. So I definitely feel like we're on the same page in terms of what should be coming from this report. And I can reach out to them again, you know what I mean? And even maybe somebody else that's in Fuss and O'Neill that's maybe not the person that we're dealing with to kind of get more of an answer. To try to address that, because I guess there's no part, I can't even try to like necessarily defend any of it. I can only say like, I apologize that I was really unaware of the timelines and stuff until it came up, and I have relied on other city staff being helpful and other groups sort of coming in to sort of prompt that piece of it.
Sure.
But I don't know why it was so lacking.
Okay. Mike, I see your hand up.
Madam Chairman, Victoria, I take it, and again, this goes back to a few years. This is the Department of DPW. This is under their umbrella of responsibilities. Is this study, the park, the maintenance of the walkways and the wall? That's under their umbrella. They'd be the city department that they're the ones that that originally asked us for the money, I believe. I can't recall anymore. I think it was the DPW, but I can't recall. I'm presuming it was. And if so, are they aware of what you just said? Are they aware of this study? Have you talked to them at all? And what is their stance? I'm why do we as a committee have to make engineering demands on you? We're not engineers. We're not contractors. We don't pour cement. I don't know why we as a committee, why we're sitting here listening to this. With all due respect, Victoria, this should be between you and Carl, or you and the mayor, or the city council, to take up this matter. This is really beyond the pale of what we should be doing as a committee. We're here to make sure you go by what you said you'd do. But the intricacies of this job, and to answer to us when we're not all that qualified to fully understand and grasp your conclusions, is limited. Does Carl know what is he aware of this report? Have you people been talking to the DPW or the mayor on this particular matter?
So I have not talked to the mayor. I think there's definitely a blend between sort of engineering projects and engineering being part of the Department of Public Works and working like that. It was in the notes that Chris Baker had left as a project. I really think that sort of the initial, or what you're seeing right now is that, you know, when Chris Baker left, it was noted as an existing project, and the goal too wasn't to necessarily be able to have me do a ton of projects. It was to more handle sort of the day-to-day with the intent that somebody new would be hired. And then, but of course I do try to answer the question. So as the project came up and Amy reached out to me, I was like, you know what, let me try to find where this is. And I thought this was great. I was going to get this report. And then when we looked at the report, it was not great. So now we're working out with them. So the point of me telling you all of this in true, transparent, honest fashion is not because I'm necessarily asking for, assistance from your group to help follow it up. I'm just trying to say, like, I'm not gonna
Provide
not agree.
communication.
It's not a full report, right? I will work on it. It's sort of something that has occurred since, you know, I probably was able to finally get in touch with him a week before that due date in April 29th. You know what I mean? So there's just that piece, I think.
Unbelievable.
Yeah,
Well,
but overall,
we
the engineering
appreciate that you're,
department is empty. Yeah.
we appreciate that you're now trying to move it forward. Like, I know that you're, I'm sure, being tasked with lots of projects, and that the early assumption was that you would just be doing day-to-day stuff, that you wouldn't have to be tracking multi-month projects along the way, because you would be bringing someone on. And I hope we do soon. But in the meantime, thank you for doing this and for trying to get some answers for us. And hopefully they do their due diligence, they actually complete the work that's in the scope, and then they redraft the final report with something that's more actionable.
Yeah.
Thank you. Any other questions for Victoria? Thank you so much
just-
for coming in. I really appreciate it. Oh, I see a quick question from Mary.
Well, I just wanted to say thank you for coming. We understand the constraints of the job, and you know, we do appreciate that you did try to help us out tonight.
Thank
So
you.
thank you.
No problem. Thank you.
Thank you, Victoria.
Okay. Have a good night.
You too. Okay. All right. Let's move back to 4. Okay, let's go to the disbursement form. Amy, would you mind sharing screen and just walking us through the questions so that the committee understands we've made it a requirement? And we just wanted to make sure that you were sharing, here's what a disbursement form looks like, so that everyone's just sort of.
Sure. I have that open to share with you. Does everybody see this?
Mhm.
Okay, yeah, so this is what the disbursement form looks like. That, you know, since I've been doing this job for more than 5 years, I've found that there's a lot of and this is really with city projects. There's a lot of, if I don't have all the information right away, it's like a lot of back and forth emails to kind of figure out what exactly they're requesting. Sometimes they'll just send me an invoice, really no explanation. And as you know, as we've talked about, there's like 20 projects. So I do have, you know, a lot of, you know, files and things, but it's really, the purpose of this is just to make it streamline the disbursement process. So it's just so that they answer a few questions about their request. So when they have a vendor invoice, they want to request, there are different things they might request. Sometimes it's a purchase order that includes a quote, and they don't actually need something paid, but they need me to put in for a purchase order, which is like the city's commitment that they're holding money for that vendor. Sometimes it's an internal journal transfer that the auditor does, but usually that's not the case. And other times, you know, it's an invoice on an open purchase order, or it's an invoice, in other words, one that's already, you know, been done, but it's an invoice for just part of that. And other times it's a new one. So I try to get all the questions in one place for them to fill out. Just, you know, a lot of these are very short answer: the date, project name, what was your total award. And then this is like what I was talking about, like click the box that best describes your submission. And then if you're submitting an invoice to be paid, what is the full dollar amount requested? What is the amount of funds you're requesting for the vendors? So there's different, yeah, it's sort of hard to explain because, you know, there's a lot of nitty gritty in the city accounting disbursement process. But this is just a way to get everything clear right from the beginning, which is actually good for the grantee too, because they could be somehow undercutting themselves. And I like to make sure that we have the same amount. Like I say, I know how much money you have left in your grant, after this, and that it balances out with what they think they have. So we're all on the same page. So that's the purpose of this. And then they attach their invoice if there's an invoice to attach. They do have to shoot me a quick email to say I filled out the disbursement form, so I know to go through and to find their response, and look for it. So, for example, here's one of the responses from Tom Reynolds. So I just get the information I need. Well, that one's totally filled out, but yeah, and so I find this works really well to do it this way, especially for city projects, since it can be so complicated.
Madam Chairman, Amy, why is this incumbent upon you? Why doesn't the purchasing department do this? Wouldn't that be under their bailiwick?
No, not really, because actually the purchasing department has a lot on their plate too, because when there's a new and this, I didn't even understand this at first because nobody really explained it, but when there's a new purchase order for a large amount, the city itself, through the purchasing department, has to make a contract with the vendor as part of their process. So they're in on it in that respect. But this is different. This is, coming from the person managing the project. They've reviewed the invoice, the ideas that they've looked at. They said, yes, this was done and they need it paid, or they need a new purchase order.
Who does, the purchasing department or us? Your last sentence.
Okay, so I'm the one who puts in a requisition order, which then the purchasing department is the only one that can approve to actually create the purchase order. But then see, there's a lot of steps to it. So then I have to get that purchase order once it's created and submit it with the invoice so that it can be paid.
And this is part of it.
Well, this is just what I've created to streamline the process, so I don't have to keep having tons of little questions and back and forth for, with the various, all the different project recipients who are asking for something or sending me emails. Instead of having lots of different emails back and forth, they have just this one place to go where they can clarify what the request is. I can look on my end and say, yeah, this balances out. Or I can, if I have a question, if I see, oh, wait a minute, you don't have this much money in your current purchase order, so you can't request that. I can make sure everything's on the same page.
No, okay, thank you.
Okay, any other questions? Oh, Jay.
Yes. How often are these requests coming in? Is this something that's happening multiple times for each project? Can you give us a sense of how the volume of these requests?
Well, it varies, but I will say this is where I spend most of my time, because once they do this, there's a very meticulous process for me to complete the paperwork online through the city's accounting system, which is called Munis. It is complicated. So if they already have a purchase order, for example, for a vendor, then it's a little simpler because I can then submit that purchase order with the invoice, assuming, yes, it all checks out, and that can be pretty simple. But if it's a new requisition for a new vendor, I have to then go through and do a very meticulous process. So it's not, I guess I would say I get at least a few every week, if not more. But so it's not like they're all coming at me they do come on a regular interval, but it's just that it can be very time consuming, all the steps involved. And part of that's because the city does not have a totally electronic way of doing this. Even though we're putting it in electronically, they require hard copies to be submitted. But they have a couple years ago, they said they were going to change that and update it, and we're still waiting for them to do that.
Okay. Any other questions or comments for Amy? It's probably one of the more complex things that Amy does, and I think this is something that she's trying to use the form to aid with all of the tracking of the information. And I know there's often back and forth too between Amy and applicants, because often I'm CC'd on those emails where she's saying, this is great, but there's no vendor number, or this is great, but you sent me the wrong PO number. And, so there's definitely a lot of back and forth. And I think the goal of the disbursement form is to try to cut down on the back and forth. So I guess my question then is it helping? Like, how long have you been using this disbursement form, Amy? And are you finding that it's working for you to cut down on the amount of back and forth you're having, right, with email between you and
It's
people?
definitely working, yeah. And I've been using it for, I think, about a year, and it's been fine. And it seems to make it kind of, like I say, it does streamline the process. Because like we were talking about, some of these projects, there's more than one. So for example, if somebody sends me something and I may not know which of their many projects they're referring to if they don't specify, so there's a lot of ways that wires can get crossed. So yeah, it's definitely saves time. And I just think it's actually better for the grant recipient as well, as I said, because then they know, then we're all clear and we're on the same page, and they know how much money they have, and I can check it on my end, they can check it on their end. So it's just a lot clearer.
Mary, I see your hand.
Okay, so that is in regards to what we passed as a motion last week. Disbursement forms must be filled out and included with invoices. So we don't need to change that, correct?
No, it was just wanting to share it with the committee, so the committee has an understanding of this is what we mean by disbursement form.
Okay, good. Thank you. Got it.
Welcome. Okay. Let's go to, unless anyone has any other questions, let's go to the signage terms for housing contracts. So to review, of the two housing projects that I have front of mind, we had the one that was on Franklin and Chestnut Streets. At that time, the goal in the conversation around signage was that we wouldn't want to put a CPA sign on a housing project, because it was sort of announcing that the building was affordable housing and that there could be some stigma associated with that. And then in the Jackson Street piece, it was like, well, these are people's individual homes, right, that they're purchasing. So that felt like a violation of individual property, right, to like require a CPA sign on their houses or properties. And so for the housing projects that we've completed so far, we have not required signage. We've never made it a de facto policy. It's just something that, like, by one-off, that's what happened in both cases. So as we're heading towards needing to determine for the Wind Development project and for the Library Common 2 project, are we going to expect signage in those two cases, or are we going to kind of, see other reasons why it makes sense to not have signs for them? So as Amy's finishing drafting those contracts, we just wanted to get the perspective of the committee. Mary, your thoughts?
Yes, I'd like to go back and see what the exact wording was, because I believe we said that it was in the case of individual homes and homeowners. I don't think that we made it a blanket thing for all housing projects. That's the first thing I wanted to say. And secondly, for Win, at one point, well, it wasn't called Win when they first started this, they actually promised to have like storyboards explaining the history of the Far Alpaca building. We don't even know if that's continuing with the new Win ownership. But at any rate, they already have been approached on the topic of signage. And so I don't see any reason why they wouldn't, why the two big projects wouldn't include a CPA credit.
Okay. All right. I mean, I think we're deciding that here, right? So I'd love to hear what people think and if they think that we should require signs or not. And then Amy will draft the contract terms based on the will of the body. Jay?
Yes, sorry. I would agree with Mary. I think those projects would be appropriate for signage, but I also like the idea of us taking allowing not having a sign in instances where it's appropriate and just making those individual decisions. So, I would just kind of agree that with the Win project that would be most appropriate.
And library commons too as well. Library commons too is a mix of buildings. It's 5, right? 5 structures, 4 structures. It's multiple structures, and some are buildings that are being renovated, others are newly built, but they'll be smaller. Yes, Helene?
Yeah, I guess I think, when in doubt, we should try to err on the side of signage. And in part, it's because it's extremely important that people in the community know what this committee is putting money towards. And I just want to be able to use that opportunity. I mean, if we're, especially like historic renovate, like, preservation, affordable housing. I don't know that we have to say exactly why they have funds from CPA, nor do I, think that that's something people would drill down on. But I do think, like, especially, I mean, we've heard how critical affordable housing is in Holyoke and how, in demand it is. And we've gotten pushback about prioritizing that. And so I just feel like, especially as there's questions, just there's going to be a conversation in the city about whether the value of CPA and the money that is generated and goes back into the community. I just definitely feel like it's very important that people understand that we're part of something like affordable housing, that we're part of things that are making the city better and making it more accessible and stable. So I just want as much visibility about what we're doing as possible. So I think especially these 2 projects, I'm okay with kind of taking it point by point with housing, because there may be some, like the individual houses, I totally get that. But I think for these 2, I 100% think signage makes sense.
Madam Chairman, are you looking for a vote this evening on those 2 particular projects to put up signs? Is that the question in front of us?
Yeah, I think we have to, as a community vote, as a committee, do we want to have one at the Wind Development building? And then I think we also have to vote on Library Commons too, and that's a little bit different because there's multiple structures. So would we require one on each structure? It's the first time that we've hit a project like that. So that's my question. So is there the will of the body, right? I'll make a motion to have a CPA sign required for the Wind Development project. Do I have a second?
So moved.
Okay, so even though it's just under discussion, is there any discussion? Or do we want to just do a vote and see where we stand?
Vote.
Okay,
Vote.
okay. Helene Busby,
Yes.
Michael Setti,
Yes.
Jay Ferreira,
Yes.
Chris Gothier,
Yes.
Mike McGrath-Smith, yes, Mary Moriarty,
Yes.
Lauren Niles,
Yes.
Maribel Ortiz.
Yes.
Is that everybody? Okay, all right, let's, I'll make a second motion that we require a sign on each of the buildings that will be renovated or newly built based on the Library Commons 2 housing project.
So moved.
Any discussion? Okay, Helene Busby,
Yes.
Mike Falsetti,
Yes.
Jay Ferreira,
Yes.
Chris Gothier,
Yes.
Mike McGrath-Smith, yes, Mary Moriarty,
Yes.
Lauren Niles,
Yes.
Maribel Ortiz.
Yes.
Okay, now let's move to the next piece, which is cemeteries and actually also memorials. So let's start with the Veterans Graves project. So would we want to have a sign attached to the exterior of the cemetery? Right, this is what I mean. That's each project's a little different, right? I can see pros and cons. So do we want to require a sign? And it's one cemetery or two? It's two, right?
There's one out in Glue Tech, isn't there? Isn't there?
I
a-
don't think that was included in this.
Oh,
Oh.
Mary, just for
Smith-Ferry.
historical information, wasn't there one at Glue Tech when it's Miss Ferry? And, well, we have Calvary and St. Jerome's and Forest
So,
Hill.
This is the issue. This the Smiths Ferry project where we restored gravestones. In the contract, this is where all this started. When the contract we were required to sign, they didn't put it in their budget. They didn't have any money for a sign. They never put up a sign.
No, I understand that. I was just looking for a number of how many cemeteries there actually are in the city. Just thought, that's just a
No,
question.
there's so many actually, and there's pocket
Okay,
cemeteries.
well, that's fine.
There's the 3 random gravestones like behind where like Pix is, or like across the street, like in the hardware store. You ever
Yeah,
walk by?
there is. There's a
Oh, yeah.
little graveyard behind there.
Okay.
Well, that's okay. We can drop that now. Just, that's okay. We don't have to go any further.
All right, Helene and then Jay, thoughts?
Jay did have his hand up first, so.
Oh, it's okay, Helene, please go ahead.
I guess I just would be interested to know, like, how, is this something we have to vote on today? And I know you have to put the contract together and stuff. I just wonder if there's like any kind of, we could get some information about when graveyards are provided funds for restoration. Like, is there some sort of common kind of procedure or what's considered appropriate in terms of signage or not? Because it does seem, this seems more uncomfortable. And I just don't know if that's like kind of a norm that's done, or if that's like kind of out of the norm. And just, I think instead of signage, what I would ask is that any of the kind of materials, and like things discussing this project that are put out would just mention CPA funding as opposed to like a permanent sign on a graveyard. But that's like, I just don't, I mean, I see, funding around housing and historic preservation and all sorts of things. And I'm just sort of like, I don't know, like, is that something when money gets given to a graveyard that you put up? Because it does seem like a little bit more upward. And I would want to know if there's kind of that
Yeah.
standard
I mean,
practice.
It's Smiths Ferry. They were not in any way against it. They just didn't have the money to pull off the sign. And at the time we discussed it, but did not choose to take admin funding out of our own budget to do so. But we could say, yeah, we think every cemetery should have some sort of signification so that people understand that this is an allowable use of CPA funding. So that taxpayers understand that they should be proud of the work that they have done to maintain the cemetery. It's not just happening because it's happening. It's not like it's not magic. Like, this is taxpayer funding that's allowed this to be restored. So I do think whatever we do, if we do require a sign, needs to be tasteful, and it has to be approved by the administrator or caretaker of the cemetery. I don't think it's something that just should be between us and even the applicant. I think that it would have to go to the caretaker or administrator of the cemetery. That's another possibility is we do need to draft these contracts. The term needs to be in there for us to draft the contract, but it's possible that we could instead, say delay those, 2 contracts or that 1 contract this term, and just say, we're going to do that one in July and invite the administrator and the caretaker in from those 2 cemeteries to the meeting to discuss it with them. Okay, Jay, and then Mike.
Yeah, I just think my general feeling is that I don't love the idea of putting a sign on a cemetery. I just feel like it's maybe not in the best taste to do that. I don't know. It just doesn't seem like something that's necessary either. I don't know how many people are really like noticing something like that either. Like, I think our website and just the fact that it's a funded project is far more useful in getting the word out on that type of stuff. So like, I would just say like, I basically like, I don't think signs are that useful, and I think they're potentially in bad taste. So we should just err on the side of, in the instance of like a cemetery, of not having one. That's kind of how I feel about it. But I don't feel that strongly about it. So if anybody else, wants to move it forward, I wouldn't object too strongly. But that's just kind of where I land on it, is that I I don't think many people notice, and that it could be in bad taste, and we may as well not in certain instances. So that's how I feel.
Okay. Mike and then Mary?
Well, Madam Chairman and my fellow committee members, I do feel strongly about it. Given the solemn nature of a cemetery and given the solemn nature of the people that we're honoring, in this particular case, as in other cases that honored veterans, the men and women who died for our country, it is their sacrifice that ought to be highlighted and remembered, not us. We're not that important. We're just a committee that awarded the money that somebody took it upon themselves to do, to restore the honor and the dignity of the men who fell in battle. That's the important thing. A sign is not important. And quite frankly, I think it's in bad taste. It's offensive as far as I'm concerned. As far as statues, monuments, cemeteries, those are solemn, sacred, if you will, pieces of work that had to be done. It was done, but let it go at that. Let the people will know where the money came from. But people are there when they visit the cemetery. They're not going to look to say, well, geez, I wonder who paid for this. I don't think so. They're looking at their grandfather or their grandmother or an aunt or an uncle or a son or a daughter. And look at the Korea War monument was just done, just a rather small monument, but look around. The rest of the monuments don't have any signs on them. It's in bad taste. The important thing is the monument itself. Signs don't belong there. That's how I feel about it whatsoever. Cemeteries, monuments, plaques, anything of a historic, if you will, sacred nature, that their importance is them themselves, not us. So I'm against signs for cemeteries, for plaques, for historical monuments, things of that nature that are solemn in nature. Signs don't belong there.
Okay, thank you. One distinction, I think it's really important to name that when we put these signs up, we're not thanking ourselves. We're not thanking the committee. Like, I do think it's important.
I mean,
Like,
if
we're
the person walks up and sees the sign, who are they going to think of? They're
no,
not
but
think of us.
I totally understand and I hear you. But I just want to name that, like, the signs are not to honor the committee. The signs are to honor the community raising money in order to do the work.
People will know that, Madam Chairman.
Just want to make sure it's clear. All right, Mary?
If we do not decide on this tonight, if we need more information, for example, I think Helene listed a couple of different things that she would like to know more information about, and it makes sense to me too. Are we supposed to meet? We take 1 month off. Which one is it? Is it July?
It's sort of just been whenever it needs to happen. Like, we normally have 10 meetings a year. You know,
Okay.
that usually means that we have 2 in January and then 2 other months we don't meet. But it's sort of flexible based on what the community needs. Usually there's no work to be done in July because the contracts are all drafted, they've been approved. And so, you know, we're moving ahead. You know, there's like little to do other than like as on our side as a committee. But I think this year the contracts are still being developed, so there may be a need to meet in July and then maybe not in August.
Well,
Like,
then that would hold up the cemetery guy an awful lot. Okay, never mind.
but it also, it is what it is. Like, I don't
Is there a
think
way, is there a way of writing the contract and telling him that we need to think about this further?
you can write with an if, you can say sign if required. And we can, you know, as determined by the CPC committee. Yeah, you can do it that way.
Well, I don't have a
So-
suggestion on how to move it forward.
Do we want to have communication from the caretaker / administrators of the 2 graveyards?
It's on us, Madam Chairman. It's not on them. I mean, what do they got to do? It's on us.
I think some members of the committee aren't as clear as you. I think you have a very clear perspective. It's great. I think that's lovely, but I think other people may not. Just
I
read the-
would be,
Maybe that people are ready to move. They're ready to vote on it. I'm fine with that. Trying to get a sense of the room. Yes, Celine.
I would just be interested to hear that those who are administering, and there's a lot of competing, I think, good intentioned feelings right now where, it like things can't, unless things are preserved, they won't continue to exist and be something that's so that making sure people are aware of that, I think, is a very valid interest. I have, the personal, I mean, for me, less so memorials, honestly, than just like the idea of, deceased bodies and signage, like that's giving me the kind of, that's the bridge too far potentially. But I would be interested in what the caretakers have to say if they want to come, not like require anybody, and what the person who put the project in, what their thoughts are, just to have like a more, informed, because this is not anything I've ever thought about before. And so I feel like, as historic preservation has gone on in cemeteries all over the country, this must come up, and so just to have an idea of like what other places have approached and have thought of. I mean, I'm not wild about the idea, but I would like to I'd like to make a more informed choice about what's considered kind of appropriate or not. So I would be happy to hear if folks wanted to, or if they just want to share an email. Like, I don't want to put anyone out, but those are my 2 cents.
Okay. All right. Well, let's table for now then, and then I will talk to Wayne and we'll get a response. Either they'll come to the next meeting or we'll just get it in writing and then send it to the committee. Whichever one we can do faster. Okay. All right. And this extends to memorials. We've done different things with memorials. JFK, we did require one. And a Lady Liberty.
Yeah, there is one for Lady Liberty. It looks ridiculous.
Yeah.
Just a huge statue of Lady Liberty, and you got this little sign on the side. It looks ridiculous. It's in bad taste. It takes away the dignity and the solemnity of the purpose of the monument itself, and the 55 men who gave their lives for the country. What are you going to give them? We're there to honor them, not to honor us as the salvation of these men, because we gave them some money. Their sacrifice is better than ours. That's why I don't think we should have put a sign on Lady Liberty. It looks ridiculous. It's in bad taste.
Okay. We've also talked about wanting to shift the design of the sign. Just finding it's too loud, given sort of the historical nature of a lot of the things that we're dealing with. We got a complaint about like the ballroom to the extent that it was taken down at City Hall. I know, I think those things are all connected. And so I've talked to Amy and she's been working on finding some quotes. I don't think that she's landed on anything yet that seems like it's a great fit. But trying to find a sign that's a standard sign that's just plainer. Like make it look like it's a bronze sign with a raised logo, but like make it really tasteful. Something that, to be honest, can blend in better. Just because kind of the original sign, it's like very playful, it's youthful, it's energetic. There's some good things to it, but it reads better on a website or a logo or a letterhead. It's more aligned to like campaigning for CPA, right? Because it kind of, I think, came out of that era than it does like what should be in a City Hall ballroom or near a monument. And so I think that any signs that we do move forward with, I think that the standard design should be brought to the committee and approved, as we're sort of like reestablishing a new design for it. And I think we should make sure that it's something that we do feel better about being in historic settings. So it doesn't take away from the nature of what is there. But that's something that I've been thinking about a lot. Jay?
Yeah, I would just add also, I think it's a great discussion for us to dive deeper into, because just the nature of what we do on CPA are things that people are very important to people, and I think I have a lot of respect for Michael's passion for the projects that he's been discussing. And I think, that level of passion comes through for historic projects, that level of passion comes through for park projects. And it's just a good thing for us to make sure that we're keeping a good eye on and being respectful of the community that we're serving. And also, you know, letting, as Meg has made the point several times very well, letting people know where their money's going and how it's being spent, and that the committee is being accountable. So I think, you know, we're all in agreement on what we want. We just need to maybe dive a little deeper into how best to move forward with that. And I think that we will. So anyway, I thank you all for a good discussion today about that.
I think it's something the committee could look at in July. Like, let's look at some possible standard designs to approve. And then return to with a little more information, return to the conversation around cemeteries and monuments, because I do think it's a really important one. Okay. I'm gonna move to F. So this was just around the contract subcommittee met. So myself and Michael and Jay met, and we looked at the contracts that Amy had drafted so far and that she had already gotten feedback on, particularly like working with applicants. Like, does this sound right? Let's check this for the scope of the work, right? Are these the terms that you can agree to? And one of the things that came up was with Meg Seiler, who's the director of Wistariahurst, who had said that she felt uncomfortable with the original disbursement language and the disbursement form being required. So we had some communication with her. I had some communication, with Amy to understand like where was the rub, what was the issue with this, effectively what we came down to is feeling like we wanted to share the disbursement forms. So it's clear what the committee has agreed to. That it seems important for, for Amy's work to be able to get this specific information, and that it's something that we can feel that we should be requiring. One thing that we did do, and I know the committee's not seeing the original language, but also sort of where it landed. So we looked at the disbursement language and made some suggestions to Amy for some standard language. So let me find that really quick. All right, so this is the veteran's grave. I'll make this large so you can see it. All right, so this is the veterans graves restoration contract. We have a template, a boilerplate contract, and then we're like adding these terms to it, right? So we sort of settled on this language that we feel good about. So prior to the disbursement of funds, the vendor shall submit invoices for completed work to the grant recipient project manager for approval. Then the grant recipient project manager will complete the following tasks for the payment of invoices. 1, the completion of the disbursement form provided by the CPC administrator, which will include documentation of work completed, details on the request, status of the project, and the submission of the invoice. And 2, thorough clarification of any request for payments upon review of the submission. This originally included language like thorough clarification requested by the CPC administrator. We actually requested that information get dropped because the clarification could be coming from the CPC administrator, but it also may be coming from the chair. It may be coming from the entire committee. So if you'll remember, like for example, the MIFA project, it was the entire committee that was like, before the final disbursement, we need you to come back in and talk to us about the storage plan. Right? Come back in and share that with us, and then we'll feel good about the final disbursement. So making it, a little bit broader. So it may not just be the administrator that's seeking clarification, that it may be in fact the entire committee, maybe the chair, right? But we feel good about that disbursement language moving forward, that we're adding as a standard term to the contract. So I wanted to bring that to the committee. Just to explain that while we talked about the term, like the wording of it matters. So we wanted to share the exact wording that we came up with for the disbursement form. And that's all I got. Anyone have any questions around contracts or any other contract terms pieces before we move to 5? Okay. All right. So for 5, just this update from the Secretary of State / Attorney General's office. We're gonna have to table it because I reached out and it took a few figuring out who to talk to, like who was the right person to talk to, who would have the answers to that. And I finally found the right person. And we have a conversation scheduled for tomorrow. We had an initial one today, and then just needing it to sort of be put in a position where it can be in writing that I can share with the committee. Once I have it, I can send it on. And now this was just our question around as it's going to the ballot. Is there anything that we need to know about like what is allowable or not allowable for us as members of the committee to do in support of the CPA, surcharge staying the same. And it seems like the answer we get is going to be sort of in alignment with what I think a lot of us would want to do, which is, effectively be in support of keeping CPA funding the way that it is. But I want to get the details to you. So I'll make sure that I send that out to by email as soon as we have it, and we'll just table it so we can take it up and review it in the next meeting. But I'll make sure that I send it out. All right. Item 6 is just website update. So, because Jay has kindly stepped up and said that he would work on the website. I sent an email between Jay and Joanne, who's been working on the website for us and who designed it, so that the two of you can connect so that we can figure out how to activate all the FY24 stuff that you made, and make sure people can see it on the website, and then figure out how to update the map and the spotlight section using one of the new projects. So that was the only thing I had for website update, unless you had anything else, Jay.
No, I think we'll be ready to roll as soon as we talk with her, and we'll get that information out for folks to see the good work that we've done.
Totally. I think it also makes sense too for whether it's you, Jay, or someone else from the committee. I think it's good. Like last year, I made like a mini, almost like a video slideshow that just like kind of walked through each of the projects, and we posted that. We do a lot of people who still don't know what the projects are, right? And so we're trying to figure out how to get the word out there. And I will say last year, the coverage was way better. This year, the coverage centered on the ballot question. The coverage that we got in the news was not as great as it's been a couple years. The last few years, like every time we've had a funding cycle, we've always gotten consistent news coverage. And this year we really didn't. The coverage that we got was more about the ballot question, because the ballot question was being resolved right as our funding cycle was finishing. So I do think that we have a little bit of work to do in terms of just sharing to the public. Here are the projects that we funded this year, which we can do through Facebook, our website. Once it's updated, then we can share the website. So I do think that we need to just keep talking about doing that because of sort of that timing and what happened there with the news coverage. And then 7, vote for CPAC officers. So excited. We now need to vote for officers for the coming year. And so I'm wondering if somebody wants to make a nomination. Yes, Mike.
I nominate Jay to be our next chairman.
Second. And under discussion, Jay, are you willing?
Yeah, do you want the job?
Yes, I'd absolutely be willing to facilitate the meetings if the committee would have me.
I think you'd be a great chair, Jay. And thank you for being willing to step up. It's a lot.
Yeah, this is all fun, so fun for me though, so I enjoy it. I really do.
Any other discussion? Okay. Helene Busby,
Yes to that.
Mike Falsetti,
Yes.
Jay Ferreira,
Yes.
Chris Gothier.
You're muted.
Yes.
Meg McGrath Smith, yes. Mary Moriarty,
Yes.
Maribel Ortiz.
Yes.
Are there any other nominations? I'd like to nominate Mike as the vice president or VP, vice chair. Is there a second?
Okay, second.
Under discussion? Okay.
I
Mike.
have one thing to add if I could.
Yeah.
I would appreciate having Mike with us. He's a very involved member of this committee. He has great passion for these projects. He does a lot of legwork. First one at the meeting every time, and it's we just need that. These committees don't just run on passion. You know what I mean? There's work to be done, and Mike's somebody that does that work. So I hope that we could add him as our vice chair.
Thank you, Jay. I appreciate that. Thank you.
Yeah, I appreciate you, Mike. I really appreciate that. There's been a number of times where I just needed something to occur, and I knew that I could call Mike and be like, can you go bring this document to this person? They apparently don't know how to use computers. Can you just go bring this contract and get it signed? Can you go help me knock doors and pass out the Jones Point Park master plan document so people know to come to the meeting, right? He was like, okay, sure, I'll come. So thank you for the legwork. I really do appreciate it. It's really important. All right, so we have in the past kept treasurer open because we have had the financial consultant that, you know, someone could make a nomination instead to have a treasurer. But in the past is what we have done, just so we're being, you know, transparent about that. And then the other role is who's willing to be the secretary, who's willing to be the note taker.
Did we just vote for Mike?
Oh, we didn't. You're right. I forgot to vote. I was like so in my mind that I was moving forward. Okay. So let's vote for Mike. Okay. Helene Busby,
Yes.
Mike Falsetti,
Yes.
Jay Ferreira,
Yes.
Chris Gothier,
Yes.
Meg McGrath Smith. Yes. Mary Moriarty,
Yes.
Maribel Ortiz.
Sí. Yes.
Love it. Okay. And then who is willing to be note taker? And is that question, Mary, if you're willing to, or if you're looking to disperse the role to somebody else? You've certainly done your time if you don't want to continue.
Okay, so tell me, I was under the impression that you could only be voted in 3 times for any of these offices, and I've been voted in 3 times. So I think it's time to move on.
I think you're right. Yeah, you're right, because this would be your 3rd year. Or this would be the end of your 3rd year.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right.
Madam Chairman, this is not an elective office. I don't want to lose Mary on a technicality.
Me either.
It's not an elective office. This is an
Well,
appointment.
you wouldn't be losing me. You would be gaining a different secretary.
Well,
It's
we'd rather not
bylaws
lose you
around-
in any event.
It's a democracy. We believe in the peaceful transfer of power.
Well, in this particular case, it's sometimes change is not always for the better. But this is not an elected position. It's an appointed one. The president, the vice president, and treasurer are elected positions. Mary is not. She volunteered. And
That's not
I don't want
true.
to, well,
Oh, I see what we're doing
Yeah.
here. There's like this little back door to, I swear she's not elected. She was voluntold to do this.
that's how it works.
Voluntold, I like that.
Also, the
Um,
question is, I do think that Mary has done her time not to step down as much as I don't want her to.
Yeah, but who's going to do it any better? She's the best. I mean,
Come on.
yes, I'm serious.
That's what you say when you can't find anybody else.
Exactly.
So we have Chris Gothier, we have Maribel Ortiz, we have Helene Busby. The only other thing that was done at one point was literally like the committee didn't have a secretary and they paid for somebody to take minutes, like outside the committee, like we hired someone. That's how I originally came on the committee. Because they
Yeah,
were
you're right.
paying for someone to take the minutes, and I was like, this is ridiculous. So I came on as a volunteer as the secretary.
Yeah.
Before I was even on the committee.
You're right.
Okay.
I remember that.
Yes, Jay.
Well, I guess I have 2 questions. Number 1 is who else might be interested in doing it, and then number 2 is, do we have the ability to just like vote our way out of this? Could we just like, you know, make an exception and vote as a committee to say, you know, if Mary were interested to bypass
Bylaws.
whatever
You have to run them.
ordinance or bylaws that there are for I mean, I'm not sure there's going to be much dust up over over something like that. So I don't know. I mean, I'll
Well,
say this, Mary,
someone
in my
else is
opinion, doesn't
interested
out.
first. Because I think that the bylaws, if they're changed, I think need to be run by city council. Like, I don't think it's as easy as we just decide. They were
Yeah.
approved.
Well, yeah. Okay.
Yes, Amy?
I think you do decide because there are certain rules, they're just called committee rules. That I remember once with the first chair, they added something to the rules. So, I mean, I'd have to look back at it, but I'm pretty sure that's the kind of thing a committee could do. Look for it now. Let's see.
Well, I guess my question is this, I'll be blunt, like, so Chris, Maribel, or Helene, are any of the 3 of you willing to step in and be the person taking notes?
I wish I could say yes, but I'm on too many other boards at this time.
I think I can, really. I'm in the another like boards too. Like I'm extremely busy.
Thank you.
I think Mary does it.
Maribel.
You know.
Thank you very much.
Maribel says she can't because she's too busy.
I will say, poor Mary. I do want to say though that even though it sounds like everyone's buttering you up because you're the only one that really wants it, but I have to say, of all the things I've ever been on, all the committees, and I just like the precision and the amazingness of the notes is like pretty unbelievable. It really is just like, wow.
So Helene,
so-
you get the prize for the best compliments, okay?
Well done.
I mean,
Well
I
done.
mean it. I'm like, that is just anyway. So I think I appreciate your service. I don't mean to like lay on the guilt or anything like that, but it really, is just like a super high bar for maintaining the information that's happened. So thank you very much.
Well, thank you for that. But it still depends on the bylaws. So let's see.
Well, and to be fair, like, it's not like I came to this meeting with having recently reviewed the bylaws to see if it's possible. So I don't know, right? Like, and I don't want to really give a quick answer and it's not correct either. So,
I'm looking at them now if you want me to share what it says.
well, I know it's not that I don't, it's more about like the process of changing them, right? Are you looking at the process by which you change?
Yeah,
your-
well, I know that it's been done before because like I said, they added Article 13 at the end. It was just a simple vote of the committee. So this document's completely created by the committee. It's the CPAC rules. So it says officers shall serve a regular term of 1 year and may be reelected for no more than 2 consecutive terms. But then it says in the event of a vacancy in any office, the committee shall nominate and elect a new officer from its members at the first regular meeting after the vacancy has occurred to fill the remaining term. So it's completely up to the committee. But you just have to formally vote and then I would add it onto the rules, or amend it or whatever.
Yeah, what the rules I'm sure that we can change. I'm pulling at Municode. Like, I want to know what's in the actual document that, is there that we may not have the ability to change.
Well, let's wait until the next meeting then.
Yeah, I was just gonna say, I'd like to make a motion that we all, the committee all would love if Mary could continue if she was willing, but we're not sure if we can, and we're gonna look into it for next meeting, something like that.
So moved.
Okay.
So she doesn't talk her way out of it.
If Mary can't serve or don't Mary, I will do it.
I just
I
saw.
You don't,
Take notes during a meeting if I need to, because I just don't want to put pressure on you that you have to do it. But if you're willing to, and we can, right? My goodness, I would love to still have you in that role in the committee. But I don't want you to feel entrapped either. Yes, Amy.
I just want to let you know, actually, Article 13, the one that was changed, it says amendment and revision. These rules may be replaced, revised, or amended at any time by a 2/3 vote of the committee with the approval of the city solicitor and such, I'm not sure why the city solicitor, that's what it says, and such revisions shall take effect upon filing with the city clerk. So that's the
that's kind of
process.
that's kind of a major to do.
I don't think it really would be too major, to be honest. I think they're pretty, they're open to what you want to do.
Mary, it's usually just a piece of paper. It's usually a document like this. It's just this, sign it, date it.
Yeah.
It doesn't even have to be signed. I mean, I would, this is what the document, I don't know if you can see, but I guess I would just sort of let them know this is what the committee wants to do.
Yeah. And we're allowed to do it because in Municode, in the ordinances, it's underneath administration and operation for our committee. It says the committee shall annually elect one of its members to serve as chairperson and may elect such other officers as it deems appropriate. So that's the only thing that's in ordinance. So that gives us the flexibility in our rules to define it. That's what I wanted to find. Because I didn't want to say yes and then like there are specific things in ordinance that we can't get around without making big changes. Okay, so then the committee can. So then, does someone want to make a motion to amend that rule? In
Jay,
order to
you want-
allow the role of the
Do you want to
secretary?
make it, do you want to make it specific for secretary or make it specific for temporary? You know, in other words, temporarily because we don't have another one.
I think it should be for secretary. I don't know if we could put it as
Okay.
like,
Sure.
does someone have a motion they want to make? Like, what should the language be?
Well, I'd like to, you kind of lost me. I'd like to make a motion that we vote for Mary as our official secretary person from now until the end of the world.
And
Second.
amend the rules in order to allow the secretary to serve at the will of the committee for the number of years as determined by the committee.
By God.
Oh my, oh my.
Don't put that in an official motion.
The secretary has some say too, right?
Okay, so to amend the rules to allow the role of secretary.
So how about make it for another year? That way, at the end of this coming year, maybe somebody will be willing to step in.
Okay. So amend the rules to allow the role of the secretary to be held for additional 1-year terms as voted by the committee. Does that work?
Sure.
Okay. Yes, Amy, question?
I've seen in other parts of the rule, sometimes it will say like, you know, until, if there's a vacancy, like until it could be filled, you know, that could just be one way of phrasing it so that it leaves it open. Because lots of times you can't immediately find somebody to take it on. And if that person's willing to keep going until another person is found, that might be a way to phrase it.
Okay, so the motion is to amend the rules to allow the role of secretary to be held for additional 1-year terms as voted by the CPC or until a vacancy is filled.
That sounds good.
Sure.
Okay. All right, do I have a second?
Second.
Okay, in favor, if you vote yes, you're voting yes to amend the rules. Helene Busby,
Yes.
Mike Folsetti,
Yes.
Dave Ferreira,
Yes.
Chris Gothier,
Yes.
Meg McGrath Smith, yes, Mary Moriarty,
Yes.
Maribel Ortiz.
Yes,
Okay, and then a second motion to vote in Mary as our secretary for next year. Do I have a
So
second?
Yeah, second.
All right, Helene Busby,
Yeah.
Mike Falsetti,
Yes.
Dave Ferreira,
Yes.
Chris Gothier,
Yes.
Meg McGrath Smith, yes, Mary Moriarty,
Yes.
Maribel Ortiz.
yes,
Woohoo.
Thank you, Mary.
Thank you, Mary. And thanks to Jay and Mike for stepping up, really thankful. So it sounds to me like you are gonna want a July meeting. So that would mean it would be July 10th. Does that date work for people?
I mean, July's hard. I'm gonna be on vacation, so, but I imagine many people will be on vacation in July.
Yeah, so I think it's likely gonna have to be a day that we have to go back and forth on a little bit. So my question is, when are people available? If not the 10th, then is the 17th better?
I can do the 17th, and I can do the other Wednesdays in July. I mean, after
Okay,
the
yeah.
second half of July.
Does July 17th work for people?
I will be absent on the 17th.
It's gonna take some doing to date. That's okay.
It's,
So July 24th? Or do folks want to go outside of a Wednesday to a different day?
no, just the 24th is okay.
I could do that
The
24th.
is-
Does the 24th work for people? Yeah. Okay.
20.
Yeah,
All right, so July 24th will be the next meeting at 6 p.m.
okay.
Everybody, Jay.
Oh, we do
Sorry.
have to, sorry, it's important.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I just saw Jay's hand up, so I just called Jay when you.
Sorry.
Jay,
Yeah, go ahead. Go ahead,
If-
Amy. I have it's on another topic, so please.
It's just that the Board of Health shares our Zoom, so, and I have to check to make sure they're not using our Zoom at that time.
Sure.
Can't remember which day they use, so that's just all I wanted to say.
Okay. And then Jay.
Yes, well, I just wanted to thank you, Meg, for your amazing job as the chair. It's a lot of work. I know that you did, especially once you were elected. And I appreciate it. I think you were a great steward for the CPA, and you conducted the meetings, with openness and inclusiveness and transparency. And I thought you did great. And I'm glad that you're going to continue to serve. And like I said, I just want to thank you for your great work. And I look forward to working together the next few years.
Me too. Stay.
Well done, Meg. Well done, Madam Chairman.
Yep.
Well,
Yep, you are really a wizard. We do
Thank you, Meg.
appreciate all you've done.
Yeah, it's
Thank
wild. It's
you.
been 5 years. I was trying to be like, it's been a long time. And I've been here for 3 years now. So I'm both like excited and like grateful and also relieved. I'm like grateful that we have good folks who are stepping up to take it over too. So thank you all, and I'll see you in July.
All right.
Bye.
make a motion to adjourn.
Bye-bye.
Motion to adjourn.
I'll
Okay.
second.
Bye, folks.
Good night.